very little guidance, so just maybe for about 15 minutes. So we arrive and we really transition into practice space. And then I will introduce the topic for tonight. And then I want to offer a little bit of guidance around what I'm sharing. But it feels I want to actually talk about it first, but I didn't want to just start with my talk because we all still have to get here and a bit more embodied. So that's my plan for today. Does that sound okay? All right. So inviting you to find a posture that is comfortable, like for the next about 15-ish minutes. So just check for a moment, see what your body needs to feel supported, to be able to just release tension. So hopefully, so you can be at ease and alert. So that's kind of what want to invite into our practice. And like allowing the eyes to close if that feels right, or lowering the gaze, softening the gaze. And just starting to bring the attention to the places of contact that the body has right now. The floor, your cushion, your chair. Mhm. And then inviting your anchor to be in the foreground of awareness. So for probably most of us, that will be the sensations of the breath. It could also be the sensations in your feet or sounds. Anything that you can feel and you can hold in awareness. And that feels safe and stable enough. And then landing the attention or your awareness repeatedly on your anchor. So almost the way a bird lands on a branch or on a twig. So holding it with the right amount of effort. So we don't have to grip too hard, but we also don't want to touch it too lightly so that when our anchor shifts or moves, we lose it. So a bird does not fall off its branch or twig. So even when the wind moves the branch. And just gently bringing the attention back. The mind has wandered off. So just taking a moment to bring your practice for now to an end. So, yeah, and a few more people arrived. Welcome. Good to see you. Um, so we just had a short meditation, and now we'll just introduce kind of our topic for tonight, and then I'll guide through another meditation to put some of that into practice as far as we can. So what I would like to talk about is about the concept of Buddhist concept of guarding the doors of the senses. And that feels that is a particular important topic right now. I don't know how you feel about that. And it has been for years because we get so bombarded at every sense door. And and I want to kind of tie a little bit about what I talked about last week. I know some of you were here, some were not. So last week I talked about ethical behavior and their guardians. So ethical behaviors in the Buddhist practice, we practice what we call the 5 precepts or the 5 guidelines, practice guidelines for ethical living, with the understanding that acting in accordance with those guidelines brings more happiness and peace to ourselves and to those around us. And those 5 guidelines are to not harm, to not take that which is not given, to not misuse our sexual energy, to not lie or speak harshly, and to not intoxicate the mind. And the guardians that I talked about are the 2 principles of hiri and otapa. Those are the words. And hiri is a form of kind of self-respect. So basically, when you say, like, these are the principles by which I want to practice, so that makes sense to me, right? To not harm, to not take that which is not given, all of these things. But I act against that, then I have a natural, and the more we practice that, the more we actually attune or come in attunement with that, in resonance with that, is like a sense of self-respect. That, right, this feeling of like, I'm not the kind of person who does that. Yeah, so something like in our body, which is actually amazing that we have that, alerts us to, you are about to go against your own values. Yeah, so which is not kind of the shame that we might feel by culturally or societal indoctrinated shame, right? So this is very different. And it's sometimes we get confused around that because we only know shame, and that can be actually a very interesting practice field to say, like, how do I know? It's like kind of my inner moral compass in a way that says, like, no, 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 I'm not the kind of person who does that. And you can see how that can come from self-respect. Yeah. Which is like the cultural shame is often like kind of we want to disappear kind of and not want to be visible. And then the other aspect is the otapa is and it's again like those are very subtle um, concepts, and I think they're really worth exploring because we can confuse them so easily with kind of other, again, like culturally overloaded concepts that we are more familiar with. But so otapa is a sense that I don't want to cause harm to people I really love and value who would be so sad and hurting for me if they knew I would do that. Yeah, which is not that they would judge that or they say I'm bad. They're just like, oh, right? So like for those of you, like, if you have kids or you have like kids in your life, right? So sometimes, or teenagers or young adults, and sometimes they just do things. And then as a parent or as a, like somebody close to them, you go like, oh, please. You can see how they're hurting or harming themselves, right? And so that is the kind of feeling that you want your loved one not to feel that way. Yeah, which is not about like being a good girl, good boy, good person, right? So it's different. Yeah. Um, and those are beautiful practices, and they're called the guardians of the world because when we practice them or when we're attuned more with them, what happens is like we become very safe people to be around. Yeah. And we can be, and again, this is not about perfection. But one of the things that I really love about our Dharma circles is that I can trust that really people do want to live in accordance with the precepts. Yeah, again, not perfection, but just like the good intention, we're working on that. We're working on our mind. We're working on our hearts. We're working on our behavior, right? And we also work on finding better ways to rectify when we're falling or when we make mistakes, which of course we will. Yeah, which is just so important in again, like in a world where like we're not allowed to make mistakes or failures or right, instead of just like learning or growth opportunities. And so that was my talk last week in a nutshell. And so today, so I want to explore another aspect of this. And of course, the teachings are all connected. They're all connected. And I love that. So it feels like I start pulling somewhere, right? And then I pull and pull and pull, and like all the teachings come out, right? At some point. And so in a way, it actually doesn't matter where we start practicing because we will get in touch with all the teachings eventually. Um, and so And here's a teaching story, which I've known for a very long time, and I loved, and it keeps coming back to me because it is something really important landed for me in that teaching. And that teaching story, like, roughly goes like this. So, um, there was a Dharma student, and he wanted to know which of the 5 precepts is the least important. So if he could just break one, which one? So just think about it. So if you had to, right, or if you were thinking about which precept would you break and think that would cause the least harm? Intoxication. Yep. Any others? Intoxication. Yeah. How about over here? Intoxication. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Intoxication. So that's what the practitioner thought. And so I said, okay, well, I'll try that. And then the story goes like this. So he got drunk. And this is a very old story. And so he got drunk. And then when he was drunk, then he hit on his best friend's wife, and they started to have an affair. And then they slaughtered a goat to celebrate their new relationship. And then they tried to hide that from the friend. So they lied about it. So that's the teaching story. Right? So yeah, because I was like you, I thought like, yeah, intoxication isn't a problem, right? Or like less of a problem. And of course we know like this is all on a spectrum. But why I'm kind of telling this story, kind of making fun of it, is that so the precept of intoxication, why do we have that, or what does it try to protect? What are we protecting when we're not intoxicating the mind? judgment, yeah, presence, yeah, fear, yeah, discernment. Protect us from not breaking the other precepts. Yes. No, it protects mindfulness. Yeah. So the actual translation is it's what prevents so sorry, I'm not a native speaker, so I hopefully I'm not messing that up, but it's about heedfulness. Yeah. So it protects mindfulness. Yeah. Because if we're not aware, we don't know. Yeah. So this is the idea. If we're not aware of what we're doing, we can't change it. So unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, like mindfulness is really at the center so we can see more clearly. And we can see more clearly the effect of what comes in through the senses, what that does to us. Yeah. And so, and this is why this is kind of the key element. So when I want to talk about guarding the doors of the senses, it starts with mindfulness. Yeah. And so now take a moment. I would just want to invite you. So, and again, so the doors of the senses. So what senses are we talking about? What is very important that in our tradition, yes, we're talking about the five senses, our regular five senses. So like sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste. And we have a sixth sense, the mind. Joe's just pointing to his head. Yes, the mind. Yeah. And I love that, yeah, that the Buddha just kind of categorized that in with the senses. Because let's just stay with that for a moment. So think about if your mind is a sense, what would that mean? Do you take it's a doorway? Yeah. So it's a doorway. So things come in and they have an effect on us. Have you noticed that with your mind? Anybody? Yes, right? Yeah. And also, if it is a sin, so do you take, I mean, sometimes we do, and this is like what I want to make this meditation about, but at least theoretically, I hope you're not taking personally like what you happen to see, right? Or what you happen to taste or touch. I mean, you might not like that, but you don't think that is who you are. Or do you think that? But do you think that that is who you are, what you think? That was a lot of thinking in one sentence. We do, right? We totally take it personally. Yeah, I think therefore I am, right? Hello, yes. Um, and so I find it immensely refreshing to just see thinking as just another thing that happens, right? Or we'd like to say, like the brain produces thoughts, like the mouth produces saliva. I love that. You don't take your saliva personally, do you? Right? But the logoria or the thinkoria or something that goes on, we take that very personally. Yeah. So I think just that is very helpful. Yeah. When we're talking about being aware of this is one of the sense doors. Yeah. So we can maybe have a little bit more space or distance around that. Yeah. And how we're working with that. Then the next step is so um when you so let's say you see a stop sign. What do you yeah, it's kind of weird. What do you see? You see a stop sign. But what is that actually what happens when you see a stop sign? Stop, right? Yeah, right? Your body goes like, well, we need to stop here. We need to pause. We're not going like, oh, there's something that is about this size and it has this form and it has letters printed on it and there's certain colors, all of that, right? And it's very useful that we don't do that. Otherwise, we really get into trouble. Yeah, but basically what comes in through the sense door of seeing, yeah, has an interpretation. It has a meaning And we have learned in our system to act on that. And with the stop sign, that is super helpful. But of course, we're doing that with so many things that we're seeing, often to a point, right? And this is where it gets tricky. So where is that still useful, right? To kind of see the meaning compared to when we're just doing that with like a thought pattern that is arising. Yeah. So where is the thought pattern not neutral anymore or just aware of thinking? Yeah. So, and this is why when we're practicing mindfulness of seeing or mindfulness of thinking, we're really taking that perspective to say, like, we're stepping deliberately out of the meaning. So we become or have the possibility to have a little bit more space around what is happening in our experience. Yeah. And that can give a lot of freedom when we do that. And then the next step in this practice of guarding the doors of the senses. So this is like different ways how we work with that. So with what comes in, but the practice of guarding the doors of the senses is actually a very central part to particular the monastic training in our tradition. So the Theravada tradition is a quite quite austere tradition, yeah, where right, so the way they renounce a lot of or they renounce all sense pleasures actually. Yeah, and that is part of the monastic tradition. And so we have to be very clear that we're not monastics. So sometimes we can get the impression, right, that the monastic rules also uh, are true for us. And I think we have to be careful, right? Because very often, again, like we get this idea of just like that enjoying the senses is bad, right? So sometimes people have this impression of like the Theravada Buddhism is, or Vipassana is anti-pleasure. It actually is not. Yeah. And I think sometimes for some of us, right? So I have a Protestant background. So that, whoops, I should put that somewhere else so it doesn't fall down. Um, oh, thank you. I'll just clip it in my pants. Thank you. So for me, what I realized, and it took me a while to realize the way that I was hearing the teaching, and I think that is true for a lot of practitioners, was like already very much in alignment with my kind of austere Protestant upbringing. Yeah. And so you can think about that, like, so why are you not doing Tibetan Buddhist practice, for example? Yeah. And maybe some of you do. But there's something when we think about why are we drawn to this particular kind of practice, it is often, oh, because there's a familiarity, like with a set of values, for example, right? And so when you're monastic, and again, like, why is this important? So why is there this idea of just like we want to kind of turn away from engaging with the sense doors? The problem with that is, of course, you can think about that. If we're engaging with the sense doors, we can get very lost. And B, we can fall prey to what we call the three root poisons, which are at the core of all trouble, which are greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah, or versions of that. Yeah, greed is just wanting mind, yeah. And then hatred is not wanting something all the way up to hatred. And delusion is really being confused about what actually brings lasting peace and happiness. And just look around, right? We see those three root poisons so everywhere where we look. Yeah, they're everywhere. And we see also, like, if you look like at the state of the earth, right? What we're doing to the earth is that's about greed, hatred, and delusion, right? Particular greed and delusion. right? Because we think that extracting more, having more, earning more, making more will make us happy. And, right? Or exploiting people, right? That we'll get more, it will make us happy. It doesn't. Yeah. And yet it's so hard to come out or to step out of this loop. So the idea is that the sense doors can actually be intoxicating for us. Think about that. Yeah. And then what we're doing also is that is again how our nervous system works is the more we do something, the more we will do something. Yeah. So we're kind of reinforcing something. So you can think about a bad habit, right? So let's say you I don't know, I can give an example, right? So shopping for running shoes, right? So like kind of harmless, but maybe not at some point. So like if I don't shop for, I'm a runner, so many of you know that. And so we have to have a lot of different shoes and they have all these pros and cons and then for different surfaces and all of that, right? And so I can notice that when I'm thinking, oh, I need a new shoe, what kind of shoe do I get? And then if I kind of start to go down the rabbit hole of asking my friends, what are the new shoes that are there trying? And then looking on websites, right? And suddenly before I know it, like I get all the advertisement like on social media and like I get all these advertisements for shoes and I go, oh, let me just try this out. So I get even more advertisements. So suddenly like my whole like inbox, my whole world is filled with running shoes, right? And then I go like, oh, running shoes, right? And so I'm spending more time thinking about running shoes. And so it goes on and on and on, right? And you might go like, I couldn't care less about running shoes. Totally fine. But think about something where your mind does something similar, where we're just getting so seduced, yeah? And it's pleasant, it's nice, it's right, it gives us excitement and it gives us like this like boost and like the whatever, right? So it feels good to a certain extent too, so we keep doing. And that would be like a good example of like, and then if I then give into that, I end up with way more running shoes than I need, right? So, and this is a good example of how we would, or in this case, I would fall prey to not having guarded the doors of the senses. Yeah. Again, the more I pay attention to something, the more I will notice it, the more it will show up, the more it will occupy my mind. Yeah. Right. And so to be aware or to just again, like with the quality of mindfulness, to be open and curious and say like, so where do I, right, either get seduced into something, what is nice, what is pleasant, and then I overdo it. Yeah. That is one way. And the other is, so where do I, and this is really tricky, of course, where do I get sucked into, like falling into this loop of anger, um, hatred, uh, being upset about something, right? There are a lot of things to be upset about that right now. So I'm not saying they're not. Um, there always are actually, right? And so to think about, so when you look, so let's just use the example of the eyes, because I think the eyes are really like our most, maybe and at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, because it is our strongest sense organ, to think about, so how are you protecting your eyes? Right? Because so I don't know if you've ever had that situation where you're like, say you scroll on social media and you're just seeing like puppy pictures or whatever, and suddenly there is an image where you go like, whoa, no, right? I don't want to see that. And then the problem is once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Yeah. So I'm sure we all have many pictures from the media that I could immediately, like over the last 40 years, like bring up pictures from significant events in the world, pictures, photographs, right? Or short movies, right? That my brain immediately can reproduce and make me very upset. I know we all can, yeah? And in particular ones that are upsetting. And so our eyes are very sensitive. So are we guarding them? Yeah, and I see that in particular. So I have three young adults. My youngest child turned 18 on Friday, so I have three adults now. Adults. Hello, if they're watching. They won't be watching this, but um, but I'm really afraid for them. Yeah, for what they have seen, what their eyes have seen already. Yeah, with like access to everything so easily, where I think like that developmentally useful. And I'm thinking about that myself too, right? There are some things I know there are for my system not useful. It's not helpful, right? So one thing is we're like falling more into the three poisons, so greed, hatred, and delusion. But what also really happens, it does something to our nervous systems. So what is the effect when you see those things or hear those things? And I know there's a fine line, of course. Yes, we want to be informed. Yeah, so we want to be informed citizens and make good choices and be engaged in all these things, right? But to really be honest with yourself. Yeah, what is the effect? Yeah, and I know, like, and I have discussions with friends, and they say, like, I make myself watch this so I can feel it more. But what I see as the effect is they just get very upset and very dysregulated, and then they don't do anything because they're too dysregulated, and then they're completely shut down. Yeah. So the question is, again, and of course we're all different, yeah, and we're function in different ways in the world, but to think about really about, are there ways how you want to really guard your sense doors more, which is not denying anything. Yeah, so one thing where what I feel, for example, so I don't watch news anymore because moving pictures, those are the worst for me. Yeah. So for me, reading news is a way to digest it better than seeing something, right? And then of course, sometimes we need, it feels almost like I mean, this is like what the photographers say is like, we need the shock effect to wake people up to some of the atrocities that are happening, right? And sometimes if you see like the facial expression of a person, that, right, because we go into resonance with that. So that's really important, right? But yeah, so just as a question, open question for all of us, how are we working with that? How are we dealing with that? Yeah. So because we know that our nervous system has such a focus on what is negative, what is sensational, what is not the norm, right? So this is, of course, what we get presented most in the media, because that is what people pay attention to. That is what people will open. Yeah. So, and we know all of that, but to really think about how can we use our Dharma practice, yeah, to bring that into those areas. And we want to also, so and at the same time is we want to also really keep our hearts and awareness open to what works well, what is beautiful, what is whole, what is not broken. Yeah, because otherwise we can get kind of sucked into kind of really dark places. Yeah. And again, is this helpful? Does this help me to still keep showing up? right? For my family, my loved one, my community? Or is that actually just pushing me more into cynicism or shutdown? Yeah, so those all really questions. So how can we practice with that? Yeah. Um, Actually, let's just practice with that, how we can work with that. So those are many different aspects, right? And so before we go into practice, I also just want to just maybe share a couple more things about guarding the doors of the senses. So um, we can look at again, like some things I think we don't have to let in. And to think about what is that and how do I set up my guards, right? So there are certain music that I don't listen to. There are certain, I don't watch movies that are violent. I mean, that's just me, right? Because of course, I get more and more sensitive the more I practice. And those are my own choices. But again, we want to see when I, again, let something in through the senses, what's the effect of that? Yeah. Do I feel like more regulated, more peaceful after that? Or again, sometimes I really want to watch something that is more disturbing, honestly, so that I really familiarize myself, right, with just like some things are really terrible. And I need to also be aware that this is what's going on. Yeah. But that can be very deliberate and it can be dosed in a way that it's not, that's all that I do. Yeah. I'm not binge watching those things. Yeah. So that they're like embedded in a system that again helps me to regulate again afterwards so that I can stay engaged and functional. Yeah. But and with again, some things I say no, thank you, right? So and very, I was thinking about like other ways like how I practice this. So I started um quite recently, and some of you might already do this. I started using an earplug, one earplug, because I sleep on one side and I don't want to be completely plugged, and eye shades at night. And that has greatly improved my sleep quality. Yeah, because I wasn't even aware how much even like that's guarding the sense doors. Yeah, just the city noises that were coming in and the noises in the house and the neighborhood and the traffic and all of that had an effect on my sleep. Yeah. So now I have less of that coming in and I sleep better. Yeah, same with just like eye shade. So because it doesn't get dark here, yeah, because we have all the light pollution here in the city. And that for me is part of actually, again, guarding the doors of the senses. On the other hand, what I also really do more deliberately is to balance this. It's like, oh, we're so focused with the senses on what is negative. I very deliberately, I do a lot of sensory awareness practice. Yeah. So awareness practice in the body, like feeling the body, eating food mindfully, yeah, or just again like what we do in a mindfulness class, first mindfulness class, we eat a raisin mindfully, yeah. So just like we use all of our senses to bring that to the food, to practice gratitude and to enjoy that. And that's amazing. That has a really deep effect on my nervous system to do that, right? So I really want to say, like, what is, again, what is working? What is beautiful? What can I enjoy through the senses? Yeah. And then really we can think about, you can think about each of your sense doors. What do you enjoy? What do you enjoy looking at? What do you enjoy hearing? What do you enjoy touching? What do you enjoy smelling or tasting? Yeah, because if you think about it, all those senses, and sorry, just little neuroscience piece here. So all your sense organs, right? So they're like very close to your brain stem and they're very close to your vagus nerve. Yeah. And so, for example, smell is right there at your brainstem where your vagus nerve starts. So you can influence with a good smell that you like, Yeah, and maybe you do that automatically. Maybe you love like some good oils, right? Or something, or smelling flowers. And maybe you've noticed that it calms you down. Yes, it does. It literally does, because it influences and helps like the brainstem. Yeah, so where we have a lot of this activation of the fight, flight, or freeze, is it activates that. Yeah, it activates the vagus nerve. Goes like, oh, we're good, we're good, we're good. Yeah, and all the right. So the at least like of course like the senses from the touch that's in the whole body. Yeah, but so what we see, right? The visual cortex is at the back, right? Again, very close to the brainstem. You think about your ocular muscles, right? So what you hear. So all these things are actually can help you to calm down when you engage them. Yeah. And so I think those are ways where how we normally don't think about using the sense doors as a way to help us actually to be more present, to be more regulated, and to be more engaged again with what is beautiful, what is working. Yeah. So, and to be aware, and like what makes something pleasant very often is actually our being aware of it. Yeah. And our brain, and especially so the more anxious and dysregulated we are, the less we will notice what is beautiful and what is pleasant. Yeah, because the brain goes like danger, 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 right? And then we don't notice. Yeah, we don't notice that we actually like our coffee. Yeah. Have you had your coffee and without actually tasting it? Of course. Yeah. It's terrible. Yeah. Right. And then if you take a moment and go like, oh, mug feels nice. That feels pleasant. Or you can ask yourself, does that feel pleasant to have your coffee mug in your hands? Do you smell the coffee? Do you like smelling your coffee? Do you like tasting your coffee? Again, you take that in, and those are all like small opportunities where you can use your senses, right? To be more present, to be more engaged, to be more here, and to also help some of that like negative impact that we're having. So that is how we're working with the senses as they're coming in. So we can be more deliberate with what we're letting in as far as we can. Of course, there are limits, and some things we just actually don't have control over, right? But we have more control over things than we might think. And then how do we work with the stuff that has already come in, right? So when we're in meditation, to come back to the stop sign, right? So we can actually, so if I would put a stop sign here right in front of me and had you look at it, and to separate what you see from the meaning, right? So that is how we can work with what comes in through the senses. Yeah, and you can see how we have to use our mindfulness practice to do that. Yeah, so if you would just see a stop sign, you could describe that to me, right? So it has this size, it has these colors, it has those letters. Yeah, it has, if you would touch it, it would feel this particular way. And that in itself has no meaning at all. We give the meaning to it. Yeah, we have at some point agreed on that this particular sign with the stop on it means you have to stop. Yeah, but that's an agreement that is not inherent in the sign. But when we're looking at our experience, we often fall trapped to thinking that the meaning is inherent in what we're experiencing. And that is not true. Yeah. And at this point, and I don't have time for this tonight, we could could do a deep dive into dependent origination. So I just want to throw that out there as a kind of a buzzword. For those of you who either already know it, or for some of you, if you want to look it up, I've talked about it here before. I'm sure Melissa has talked tons about it here before. So you could actually look into again, like how the Buddha then talks about how that happens, that we make or apply meaning from the Buddhist perspective. Yeah. But let's do some practice now. Okay. So long winding way to get to our second practice. Okay, and what I would like to do is I would like to work with, so first of all, if you just want to drop below my words, please feel free. If you just need to be quiet and do, this is actually part of guarding your sense doors, honestly, saying like, I just can't listen to this right now. So totally fine. Yeah. And that is a skill set to actually tune a voice out. And we all know how to do that, or our brains know how to do that, right? So, and sometimes why not use that deliberately, saying like, that is not useful right now, and then use that. So, but what I want to work with first is with sight, then with sound, not a lot of sounds. I will probably, actually, we can open the door for that. And then with thoughts. Yeah. So that part of our mind that thinks. Okay, I will actually just open the door here so we can have a little bit more traffic sounds. All right, so inviting you to just settle into your practice. And so we'll just sit in silence for the first couple of minutes so you can settle back in and also let some of that settle that has been said and shared. So now for the want to invite you in a moment, not yet, I'll give you instructions first. So in a moment, invite you to open your eyes and you can kind of open and close them and just become aware that the moment you open your eyes, seeing is happening. You're not doing that. That is just happening. Seeing is happening. And then see if you can, and usually it's so quick that we don't catch it, that our mind immediately kind of assigns meaning to what we see. So even if we're not labeling it, saying like, oh, this is a picture, or this is a cushion or whatever. So immediately we have a sense of the cushioness or the floorness of something. And so as you play with this, just see if it is possible to just receive sights without immediate meaning. So if you can drop the meaning and just see colors and shapes, sizes. And so just playing with that for a few minutes. And again, if it gets too much, you just close your eyes, you come back to your anchor. You can open your eyes, you can look around again, but really being aware of, you can say that to yourself, seeing is happening. Seeing is happening. So now inviting you to shift to sounds and doing the same thing here. So just becoming aware that hearing is happening. Are you doing that or is it happening? And so maybe imagining placing the awareness at the openings of the ears and just letting the sounds come to you. And again, see if you can separate the meaning from the sound, just for right now, to play with that. So listen to the soundscape the way you would listen to a piece of music, where you're also not dissecting everything that you hear. And now for the third part, bringing awareness to thinking. And in the same way we've been working with seeing and hearing, see if you can apply the same principles to thinking. So thinking is happening. And the way that we just listen to the soundscape, can you become aware of the thinkings or thoughtscape? Just noticing, watching the thoughts arise and pass away. Thinking is happening. Okay. So we have a few minutes for questions and comments, and then I have another little teaching story for you to end. Yeah. Do you have the mic, or just wait a second? Mhm.
So my mind went to, and it was a little battle, well, lots of little battles.
Hold it closer.
But the labeling that we usually do, planning, self-judgment or judgment, and then so letting go of that and just having thought is at what point, when do you do what?
What was your experience? Did you try that to let go of the labeling today? What was that like?
There was definitely times where I had what I would call success of seeing, but my mind went to seeing, and then I was labeling. So the habit, the regimen of how I usually would try and organize my thought.
Yes.
Organize it.
Yeah.
I'm trying, the brain is doing what
it has learned. Yeah, good. Yeah, no, this is actually a great question. And so it is not either or, but it's just we want to learn different skills because different skills work differently at different times. Yeah, so the labeling, so basically just putting a very light mental note to our experience can be very helpful to kind of orient to what is happening in our experience. Yeah. And it is not an end in itself, right? It's just something, it helps us organize, right? Or be aware what is happening. But there are times when the mind just becomes more quiet often, then we don't need that. Yeah. And then we drop that. And I think that's actually really important so that we not get stuck in our meditation habits either. Yeah. But to remember, like all of these things are just, they can be very like counting breaths, right? Can be super helpful when the mind is very busy or we're very agitated to keep us present. Yeah, but it's not about the counting. And we actually have to let go of the counting at some point because otherwise we think it's about the counting and we have to get really good at the counting. It's just like it never was about the counting. Yeah. It was an aid. Yeah. And so we have, again, like we have different things in our toolbox that we then like we kind of check what's the state of the mind in that moment and then what is useful, what is helpful right now, and then, so just play with that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Organizational, what was it?
I don't remember the dependent origination. Sorry, not organization. I thought, did I talk about organization? No, dependent origination. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I found it so helpful tonight when you talked about the sense gates. When we smell something, we don't take it personally. When we hear something, we don't take it personally. So the mind is the same way. It's just a thought. And while we were meditating on the thought piece, I did something I hadn't done before in many years, ever. When a thought did occur, I just went, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one.
Yeah.
And it sort of diffused it and gave it no personal to me kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Brain is thinking. Oh, thinking again, thinking again, thinking is happening. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah. When we take ourselves out of it, it becomes a very different experience, right? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. I really just resonated with your talk as well. And specifically the idea of the way disrespect goes into it. I often feel I feel this internal feeling of disrespect when I just follow a sensory pleasure just for that sake. But I also notice often leads to a sense of guilt in me,
Mhm,
and I get really hard on myself.
mhm,
And I
mhm.
also feel that there are times where there's a belief that I don't have the discipline.
Yeah,
Like I can be aware that this might not be the healthiest choice for me, and I choose it anyway.
mhm, for sure,
And
for sure. Yeah,
I guess I just was wondering if you had any guidance in how to navigate that moment.
yeah. Thank you. Can anybody relate to that? Please, everybody raise your hand. Yes. Right. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Lots of things I could say about that that come to my mind. But one thing also is, so in our tradition, like we actually practice with restraint. We practice with restraint and we practice with renunciation. And those terms, again, I could talk a lot about that, have a very negative connotation in our society. Like, oh, right, I'm depriving myself of something. But actually to work with that very deliberately as a way to see like I'm like renouncing something to actually create space for something else. Or the teachings even talk about sometimes like, because again, like the monastic tradition has to have such a strong emphasis on renunciation. So they have to be celibate and they can't sing and they can't make music and they can't indulge in like even like the food. And so all these things. So they have to practice that a lot. And basically, the teachings around that is we're doing that in order to gain more joy and happiness and pleasure down the line, and a pleasure that is deeper than just the sense pleasure. Yeah, so kind of the meditative absorption states, for example, right? So they're like way different levels of like joy or pleasure that we know, like from these small everyday moments. But again, this has then the flip side, it came down to us almost like that the sensual pleasures, they're worthless. And I think we have to be very careful. And I think that's actually not the case. But what you're asking is to say like, can I trust myself? And then I don't know. Yeah, because sometimes, and I was again like thinking today, preparing for this, I thought like what a good example it is like very easy example is if I don't want to, let's say, eat a particular snack, I don't buy it. I don't have it in my house. That is for just a very practical way for me to make sure I'm not eating that, because I know like when whatever 9 p.m. comes around, right, I find myself covered in crumbs, right? So even though I've said like I'm not eating after I had dinners, like as an example. Yeah, so and again, that would also be again a way of just guarding the doors of the senses. And I do that with really love and respect for myself. Yeah. And then so it's like not depriving. And sometimes that's a fine line. Yeah. And then this is like, can I trust myself to just enjoy a little? That is, I think it's a very deep practice in itself. And that where we want to treat very lightly to say, like, I want to, and again, like maybe working with something where you feel like the pull isn't so strong or the old patterns. So often, because often those are old protective patterns that take over. Because again, like very often that sense pleasure or that sense, whatever we're taking in is a stand in for something. Yeah. So often like food is helps us emotionally regulate things like that. And then it's like the Buddhist practices actually don't talk about that. Yeah. And so again, I think we want to be very gentle and very careful with ourselves and also kind of not pushing ourselves too hard. Yeah, because sometimes it also feels like there's so much emphasis put on willpower, and willpower is not reliable at all. Yeah, so we're just pushing something down or we're suppressing it for a little while, but then it keeps coming back if we're not really working at regulating at the root cause that is underneath. Yeah, so very picky, tender territory. Yeah, and thank you for exploring that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. We are actually at time. my apologies. I'm happy to stay. If people have questions about the practice, I'm happy to stay on for a couple more minutes. Can we still have the story? Do you want to hear the story? Please say yes. So. This is quite a famous teaching story. I'll read that to you, the version that I found today. So the way, and again, like, with all of these texts, they're dated, they're patriarchal, they're like not inclusive. And so just please bear with this, put in like what you need to put in so that it works for you. The title of this one, the translation, is The Finest Lady in the Land. So the idea is, so this is about the most desirable person you can imagine. Yeah, so put that in. So I've heard at one time the Buddha was staying in the land of the Sumbas near the town of the Sumbas called Sadaka. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants, petitioners. Venerable Sir, they replied. And the Buddha said this, mendicants, suppose that on hearing the finest lady in the land, a large crowd would gather. Just influencers, look on social media. The finest lady in the land would dance and sing in the most thrilling way. Yeah, we have images, right? So, on hearing, the finest lady in the land is dancing and singing. The finest lady in the land is dancing and singing. An even larger crowd would gather. Then a person would come along who wants to live and doesn't want to die, who wants to be happy and recoils from pain. They would say to him, worthy man, this is a bowl full to the brim with oil. It's hot oil. You must carry it in between this large crowd and the finest lady in the land. And a man with a drawn sword will follow right behind you. Wherever you spill even a drop, he'll chop off your head right there. What do you think, mendicants? Would that person lose focus on that bowl and negligently get distracted on paying attention to the finest lady in the land dancing? No, no, sir, they said. So I've made up this simile to make a point, and this is what it means. A bowl of oil filled to the brim is a term for mindfulness of the body. So you should train like this. We will develop mindfulness of the body, we'll cultivate it, make it our vehicle and our basis. Keep it up, consolidate it, and properly implement this. That's how you should train. Isn't that an interesting story? Right? So to the point, again, like we can really focus on what is important. Yeah. And we get distracted. And we have a choice. Yeah. And there are lots of teaching stories that have images like that. You should practice like your hair was on fire. You should practice as if you would know you would die at the end of the day, right? Really, so in order, like really not in order to be morbid, but to say like practice as if your life depends on it. Yeah, because the practice actually being aware gives you back your life. Yeah, because we're like really starting to focus on what is really important. Get distracted by the dancers and the influencers and all of the many, many distractions. So, running shoes. Yeah. So thank you very much. And see you next time. I will be here one time in June and one time in July. Yeah. They will put it on the schedule. So if you check the schedule, you'll see that. So you wanted to
if you get a chance to, would like to offer a donation and help us keep track